All right, we're coming in a bit late on this game. This is Cookie versus Stuff. Stuff going by Whiplash here. I talked to Stuff a bit about his hand, and sort of settled on this 888-764. I wasn't sure exactly what he would use, but this pair of 8764s, Silver Dragon and Harloot. So this is level 5 through 8, total level equals 33. And we sort of came to 4 sevens and a 5 might be optimal because the gap between the best sevens, 8764, and the best eights, maybe 8765s, unless you're really excited about nines, the gap between 8 and 7 isn't that big. So, kind of the most value you can get per level is at level 7. And so you can get these three 8764s, or in his case, he went to 7754 in one of those slots, and a 7 Oh, actually, so he went 77766. He ended up dropping from the 8764 down to a 7754 at level 6, which let him get another level 6, a 7475. That makes a bunch of sense. Let's see what Cookie did. It looks like Cookie did 3 level 7s, 5586, 6684, 7774, and then 2 level 5s. Wait, what? Seems like Cookie only used 31 points of power. That's curious. All right, let's look at the position. So, normally in these kinds of positions where second turn is to move, if they have an appealing option in 1, then they are certainly playing to win with relatively low risk. They can also sometimes go in 8. Here, it doesn't really look like either of those options does very well. For instance, if 7475 in 1, 6565 in 4, and 7747 sweeps you in the end. So you don't have a great card to put in 1. Your only double capture in 8 is 7475. So that's probably worth either holding on to or like playing around that strength here. So maybe you want to play something like, all right, he goes for it immediately. I was assuming Cookie holds here. It's 7-3 right now. If he plays 6-5-6-5 in 1, that makes it 6-4. But then stuff can go in 7. So maybe this works. All right, I was too busy talking about general stuff to actually get to calculating much. I sort of assumed there was some hold here just because you have so many things to attack. But 6-5-6-5 in 1 is met by either card in 7, and 7-7-4-7's dead. 7-7-4-7 in 1 is samed, and 6-5-6-5 is dead. Can't take a 7 and a 5. 7-7-4-7 in 4 sets up something in 7, but nothing in 1, so stuff can go 7. 6-5-6-5 in 4 sets up nothing in 1, so stuff can go 7. 7-7-4-7 in 7, stuff can same, importantly gets the double capture back, so he'll be up 8-2, so the single capture on the last turn only makes it 6-4. And finally, 6-5-6-5 and 7, stuff can play 4-8-7-6 and 4, or 4-8-7-6 and 1, and 7-7-4-7 doesn't flip enough. So stuff has 1, taking the combo immediately. I was trying to get 1 to work, or get like, yeah, how do you play 1 leaving 8 open for later? And just never got to like, what if you just take the combo in 8? But I do think 1 is the square that's on average a little better here, so it makes sense to work through 1 before you get to 8. I think sometimes I have the instinct of like, my instincts should be right. Why didn't I look at the right move first? But in fact, it's like there is an order to like how you should think through moves and what you should prioritize looking at. And if the correct move happens to not be at the top of your priority list, as long as you get there eventually, it is all okay not to be quick and sharp. So Stuff takes it. Congrats to Stuff. I'm curious how the early game played out because if you look at Cookie's 3 cards played, he played in 2, 6, and 9. And we know Stuff played in 3 after Cookie played in 2. Because presuming Stuff is using the hand I think he used, Stuff had to have flipped the card in 2. So interesting, like, retrospective question. How did you get to this position where Stuff had, at the start where we were looking, there were cards in 2 and 3 that were Stuff's. So Stuff must have played 3 after 2 to flip 2. So we know 2 comes before 3. We also know that Cookie flipped 5. And there is no way 5586 could have flipped 5. So Cookie must have flipped 5 with 6684. So we know 5 came before 2, came before 3. Which means I think we have to have a really weird move order. It either has to be something like 6, 5, 2, 3, 9, or 9, 5, 2, 3, 6. 9, 5, 2, 3, 6 is my guess. Because if you can't flip that card in 3, like 9, 5, 2 is a reasonable move order leading to the J, and if 3 is safe, then you probably want to take the square in 6 even if you can't flip 3. So my official prediction on how the move order of this game is post-diction? Post-diction? Opposite of prediction? Anti-diction? I don't know words. Let's say post-diction. My official post-diction is 9, 5, 2, 3, 6, 8, and then how did it end? 1, 7, 4. And I think this is the first game of this rule set to be played. So maybe we'll talk a little more about the rule set in general. Because I think, like, I really, I mean, I made this rule set, so of course I like it. But I really like rule sets where you have this question of which cards do I want to use? And everything is available, but it's not as clear what's desirable when. All right, what's the rule set? Round 1, level 5 through 8, SPPWC, total level, max 33. Okay, and we have Cookie, 4, 6, Stuff. Where you have this question of, like, you can't go 3 level 8s because then you can't add up to 33, but you could go 8, 8, 7, 5, 5. And if you want, like, the strongest top end, that's going to do it. But what if 8 isn't that much better than level 7? If it's 8, 7, 6, 5s versus 8, 7, 6, 4s, then your 8, 8, 7 is not that much better than a 7, 7, 7. So I think there's an interesting question of, do you want to drop down? 8, 7, 6, 4s play really well off each other in a way 8, 7, 6, 5s play really well off opposing stuff, but not necessarily as well off each other. And so do you want to drop down there? Or if you're going to go 8, 8, 7, 5, 5 or something like that, do you want to get some 9, 9s or 9, 8s in there? But 9, 9s and 9, 8s don't necessarily play that well if they're on 8, 7, 6s. So I think something like what Stuff did here is really powerful, because the other thing is level 6 is a bit worse than level 5, but there are certainly very good level 6s. You can see 7, 7, 5, 4s. But level 5, like, always holds up. It is always reliable to run level 5s. They just always end up having, like, useful total power. If 5s don't have access to the number 8, but their total power is otherwise, I think, the same as level 6s, basically, where level 6 has access to 8s, but the cap on total power is barely increased. So what you see in level 6 is wider range cards, because the biggest numbers become 8s, but that means to stay the same total, the lower numbers have to drop off, and you get, instead of level 5, which is these very balanced cards that can be good multi-directionally, you get these cards that if they have like an 8 and a 7, they're going to have like a 2 and a 4 as the other numbers. And obviously there's 8, 7, 5, 3s, which are a little closer to kind of balanced multi-use cards. But level 6 ends up having some of the biggest splits. What is an 8, 7, 5, 3's total? 23 power versus a 6, 7, 6, 3, which is 22. So I guess it gets up to 1 higher power, but it's very close. The jump between 6 and 7, unless you really want 8s, is quite small. Sorry, the jump between 5 and 6. And the jump between 7 and 8, unless you want 9s, is quite small. So you could argue 5 and 7 are the best levels here, like per level spent. and that you should be trying to maximize how much you're doing within those levels, leading to a distribution like 77775. Of course, depending on what your hand wants, that might not appeal to you. Here we saw 77766 winning. But there is a case that, like, no, nines actually are worth going for. Now, it's hard to come up with a hand. The thing is, I don't think you want to start with a nine starter, a starter with like nines out, especially on a split level rule set like this. Because the thing about a big corner starter is you want to be able to build out from it, and you can't if it has really high numbers facing out, because you are so susceptible to combo potential if they have any play against it. So I think it's worth committing to these big high corners if you think the opponent is likely not to have them covered. There are some rule sets where it's just very hard to cover stuff, and if they can't cover it, then those big corners are huge. I also think they're pretty good on second turn. Just the power of being able to take stuff with low weird numbers that can't be comboed facing out, and just the overpowering strength. And also, if there's cards in 1 and 7, being able to go in 4 and know you're safe because you have the max number facing out. There is real value there. And there's real value to knowing you can just overpower. I think especially on second turn. So there is some upside there, even if with it as a card in your hand. But I think it's worth saying it shouldn't be your starter. Now, if you have tons of nines in your hand, then you have ways to play next to it without being susceptible to combos if needed. But if you don't, and on this kind of rule set you're not going to, it is very unpleasant to have to play next to. And that means it is very unpleasant because you have to hold onto cards in your hand, and as long as your opponent delays interacting, it's really difficult. So I think you do not want a high number corner, and I think something like what I think Cookie did, because I think this game went 9-5-2, with I think a starter in 9 makes a lot more sense to me. A 7-7 corner, your hand can be good at recapturing, and it looks like Cookie's was. With a plus wall in 8 and a couple different ways to take in 6 with different numbers facing out, so hard to walk into combos. I think this makes a lot more sense as a corner that can put some pressure on your opponent's hand. It can be a little tricky for your opponent to take. Here, for instance, Stuff's only capture from 8 was 4-8-7-6. And so if you have any play against that, suddenly Stuff is getting himself in trouble. So I think a starter like that makes more sense than a much bigger corner. I think medium corners make a lot of sense on this rule set. So I like that Cookie, I think, did that. And I like Stuff's hand choices here. I thought he was going to go 7-7, 7-7-5, but what he does looks like it makes sense. He definitely was saying 7-7-5-4s were interesting. All right, I'm going to pop open a window and see what the actual rule set order was. Again, my official prediction is post-diction is 9-5-2-3-6-8-1-7-4. Happy to see Stuff returning playing well here. Obviously, Cookie has already won a tournament in the return, so we're rooting for the other old dog here. 9-5-2-3-6. Ooh yeah. And it was their second game. All right, so we'll go check the other one in a moment after I put this one in. So 7-1-4-7-9, 7-6-4-8-5, 6-6-8-4-2, 4-6-8-7-3, 5-5-8-6-6, 7-4-7-5-8, 6-5-6-5-1, 7-7-5-4-7, 7-7-4-7-4, and 4-8-7-6 remaining. But this was game 2. We missed game 1. Let's find game 1. And think about what happened. All right. So our move order here, we'll just try to consider it, but, it's going to be hard to follow, of course, is 1. So Stuff had first turn, Stuff 5-5 Cookie, 7-4-7-5-1. So Stuff has a 4 corners hand. And he ended up using a vertical horizontal type card, in this case vertical. So he throws the vertical in 1. And Cookie goes in 9. I wonder if you could attack it immediately. Because one thing I notice in Cookie's hand is it must have 6-5-7-7, which means what are Stuff's recaptures? Stuff has a very clean recapture in 4 with 7754, but in 2, his 4876 is covered, and his only other cards have a 6 facing out that can take it, so if you have play against that 6, it seems promising. Do you have play against that 6? Well, it seems like no, but also there's some setup potential in the air. Trying to think through the cards we're seeing here, but maybe not quite. Actually, what am I talking about? Cookie does not have a capture in 4. Yeah, because Cookie has Iron Giant 6865 7147. So this is a corner starter putting pressure. Okay. Cookie goes 9. Clearly that was Cookie's planned part starter. Stuff blocks 2. That makes sense, right? Cookie is no capture in 4, so you block the square they could attack from. Cookie plays in 6, setting up pluses in 5 and 3. This is a very natural response, one I tend to like. Also note Stuff's only capture of Cookie's starter is 4876 in 8, and Cookie's only capture is 4876 in 8, and Stuff now is a plus in 5 against that. So there are definitely tools in the air. All right, that seems like a good move, just eyeballing it. Stuff blocks 3, Cookie gets his play in 5, Stuff takes safety in 4, Cookie takes a plus in 8, and Stuff gets the capture in 7 to hold the tie. Alright, so that looks to me like I would have expected to be a little better after the first few moves, but after Cookie's move in 6, he's probably not just tying, but tying maybe with some advantage. But then in game 2, Stuff wins. Do we want to solver this? Well, it's been such a short video that we probably could. You know what? We can have short videos. It's okay. I'll solver it later if someone wants me to. Looks like a nice win for in the battle of the old timers. Yeah, that's all I got. Sorry, I only caught a few moves of this one, and then tried to piece together the games.